Hello, everyone. It's Leslie Flowers, and this is Awakening Your Infinite Potential Telesummit, sponsored by Accelerate Experience Events 2018. And I'm here today with the wonderful Susan Walsh, who, if you know her, she's a highly sought after and highly recommended transformational coach, speaker, and results expert. Susan is an extraordinary catalyst, leading people from uninspiring lives to unprecedented lives. Susan, I can't wait to hear about that. Her expansive depth and breadth of knowledge and application of the knowledge in the lives of her clients and in her own life has won her the admiration and recommendation of world-famous industry leaders, including Tony Robbins, Lisa Nichols, John Assaraf, and Mary Manon Morrissey, as well as her clients. Now, for 30 years, you should know that Susan has immersed herself in doing what she loves, the work of transformation and personal development. And she is passionate about helping people create and sustain breakthroughs to new, exciting levels of living. Well, Susan is a certified transformational coach and licensed to deliver the Avatar course. This, coupled with her prior leadership experience as a corporate executive, is all expertly combined to have you arrive at the place you once thought was impossible. Susan will guide you by small steps and quantum leaps to an extraordinary, fulfilling life where you can successfully live your purpose and your passion. She is an inspiring speaker who captivates and engages audience by connecting them in a powerful way. Susan has shared the stage with luminaries such as John Assaraf and Mary Morrissey, among others. Her brilliant teachings on transformation, mentorship, success principles, universal law, and tapping into our innate, unlimited potential, accompanied by Susan's warmth, humor, and a rare deep and authenticity, all make her a highly sought after speaker. Susan, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you for that introduction. Thank you so much for having me here. And I want to talk today about a quantum leap from the dark night of the soul to our infinite potential. Is it right if I just jump right in now?
Jump right in. You're going to tell us your awakening and what you did, and I just can't wait for the audience to hear what you're going to share with them. So please.
Thank you so much. So yes, I like to look at it that it's an unusual way to come at it, but the dark night of the soul, people usually come at infinite potential from a different place. But the dark night of the soul is actually the dawning of our infinite potential. And dark nights of the soul, they look different for everybody, but there's something that challenges us at a core level. And the challenge is deep-seated and it's tenacious. And I don't really think that there are any two alike, and don't compare yours to others. They'll be common ingredients. And if we allow them to, they'll break us open to the greatest selves we ever could have imagined, a version of ourselves that we never thought possible. So not only did my dark night of the soul propel me in significant ways along my transformational path, I learned that out of our darkest nights can come our brightest hours, and that they carry within them the seed of infinite potential. So for me, it was working as an executive in banking. I became pregnant with my first child. And at that time, working from home or part-time just wasn't an option. So I made the decision to leave my position and stay home and become a full-time mom. And it was really a magical time. I waited a long time to have a child, and I was so overjoyed to be Ryan's mommy. I would take him with me almost everywhere I went, and he was such a relaxed and happy baby. So one day, Ryan was about 3 months old. I was with a group of people, and two men, I overheard them talking, and they had both lost their sons. Their sons had died. And I just looked at my precious little boy, and I thought, I could never live through that. And I was going to a wedding out of town, and I was going to be staying with my mother who lived in Texas. And I was really happy about that. So since my dad had passed away several months before, and I hadn't seen her since shortly after the funeral. So it was great that this happy occasion was coming up, and I had completely put out of my mind that conversation with those men. So everybody's really happy for this wonderful occasion happening. And when I got to my mother's house, I found out that she hadn't ordered the full-size rental crib from the company I'd asked her to call. Instead, she borrowed a porta crib from a neighbor. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they're really soft structures like a playpen, not a hard wooden structure like a crib. So when I first saw it, instantly I could feel this sinking sensation in my gut. I wanted my baby to sleep in a real crib. But by now the rental place was closed, and my mother assured me that the neighbor used it for her grandchild and it was going to be perfectly fine. And so with no other options, I agreed, knowing I was going to take care of that first thing the next morning. So the next morning was the day of the wedding. Ryan wasn't awake yet, which was typical for him. He was a really good sleeper, and I'd usually have to wake him up. When I went to wake him up, I immediately noticed that something was very, very wrong. He was in an unnatural position, and I was terrified. I rushed to the porta crib to get him out, only to discover that he was stiff and blue. A neonatal nurse happened to live across the street, and she came over and performed CPR while I was waiting outside for the ambulance to come. And I felt as if I was losing my mind. This can't be happening. My skin felt as if it was on fire, like somebody peeled off the outer layer of my skin, and all the nerve endings were exposed and burning. I want you to know, you may feel like you're losing your mind, and like its reality is slipping away when your dark night of the soul starts, because it is. The reality of the life you've known, it's over, and it's leaving sometimes in this cataclysmic whoosh. So after several hours of valiant effort by the hospital staff, they came to tell me that Ryan couldn't be saved. Just like that, I realized that life as I knew it was over. I was devastated. I managed to get to the airport, and the flight home, I remember thinking, I don't want anybody else to get hurt, but if this plane were to go down, it would be okay with me. So at Ryan's wake, the first gift from the dark night of the soul came to me. People were coming up to me and giving me hugs. And for the first time in my life, I could actually feel the energy, the vibrations coming from their bodies into mine. It was more like it was radiating from their body into my body, from every single person. It was such a surreal experience. And I realized later that the only reason it was possible was that my ego had collapsed. It had been completely shattered by the death of my son. Normally, I wouldn't be able to experience anything like the sensation of physically feeling love from people radiating into my body, except for the fact that the ego, which happens to be a very good suit of armor, wasn't there to block it. So this was my first lesson as well. The collapse of the ego feels unnatural and disorienting. It isn't the way we normally move through the world. And you know what? That's a shame, really, because its collapse isn't to be feared. It opens up a way of connecting with human beings on a much deeper, more profound level. So there were lots of wonderful people who went to the wake and came back to my house afterwards, and one of them was my dear friend Michael. And out of the blue, I heard this small voice inside me said, "You have to ask Michael for a ride on his motorcycle." Well, my rational mind jumped right in and said, "You can't leave. You have a house full of guests here for you." But I knew I had to listen to that still small voice. It was very compelling. It was the voice of my intuition, or my inner being, my higher self. So I went to Michael and asked him to give me a ride on his motorcycle. And we rode down on his bike to the ocean. We were going over 85 miles an hour. The wind was blowing against my helmet, and the noise level was really high. But still, through all of that, I heard that still small voice again. And this time, as it spoke to me, a brand new, tiny pinprick hole got created in the black and the darkness that had been enveloping me. And some light was actually streaming through that tiny little hole. And at the same time, the voice inside me said, and I could feel these words being said, "Everything's going to be okay someday." And that little hole that got created in the total darkness was letting hope in. And that's an important piece, From that moment on, I knew it was still going to be dreadful. It was going to be devastating, but I had hope that someday it would get better. Had I not listened to that still small voice, I wouldn't have received that second gift of hope. Listening to the still small voice was the second thing I learned in my dark night. But still, every morning I woke up and it was like the worst version of Groundhog Day ever. Every morning, as soon as I awakened, my first thought was, Ryan's dead. Day after day, until one day I got to the point I could say, Ryan's dead. Now what? And this was me moving into acceptance and pivoting towards what was next. It's a necessary step in our evolution through the dark night and into the light of infinite potential. And for me, it was lesson number 3. Each and every day, I focused on that little bit of hope I had. More often than not, I was focused on the grief, but every day I focused on that little bit of hope to the best of my ability. And I was nurturing that hope on a daily basis, and it was growing. And that was the next lesson. We have to nurture whatever hope we have to make it grow, because hope is the doorway, the portal to all the good that's in store for you. I realized that this was the worst chapter of my life ever, and I was pretty clear it always would be, but it wasn't my whole book. There were still other chapters to write, and this was not how my story was going to end. So for many years, I had tied my identity to being a banking executive, and I was really grateful to exchange that identity to be Ryan's mommy. But now I left banking and Ryan was dead, so I was temporarily in that void, and you will feel that sense of void in the dark night, that desolate place where you don't even know who you are anymore. I had to find a new identity. I had to find out who I was without being executive and without being a mom. And there's grieving around that. And that's the 5th lesson that I learned from the dark night of the soul, is that you have to create a new identity. When your dark night of the soul hits and your identity is shattered, it holds within it the seed of a whole new, never before experienced identity. Before my son was born, I loved my adorable little fluffy white dog, Molly, with all my heart and soul. She was my baby. I didn't think it was possible to love anything any more than I love Molly. And then when Ryan was born, I discovered that there was a whole nother level of love, something I didn't know anything about before. And so it was with my love for God or source or higher power, whatever you want to call it. Before Ryan's death, I loved God with all my heart and soul and didn't think it was possible to love God any more than I did. But through that opening that was created, I came to know a whole deeper, more experiential way of loving and being in a relationship with God. And that brought me to my next lesson, which is that the dark night of the soul has the potential to open you up to a whole new relationship with your higher power. This was an experience that changed my whole life. And now my work, which is my absolute passion and joy, is supporting people and guiding them through their own transformations. The dark night of the soul created such transformation for me. It enabled me to tap into my infinite potential. So Albert Einstein, Thomas Edison, Rudolf Steiner, many, many others, although they refer to it as by different names, they all tapped into their infinite potential. And we can move into our own unique version of our unprecedented lives. There's a natural inclination to want to avoid feeling what there is to be felt there. That's normal. But it's in those dark places that we don't want to go. That's where there's richness and fertile soil. It's going to require the light of day at a later time, but in order for it to begin its growth, it starts in darkness. And out of the darkness, something beautiful emerges. And so it is for us. Something beautiful is going to be brought into existence by means of you. The dark night of the soul, not only can it open you up to your infinite potential, it will bring with it amazing gifts. So how do you go from the darkness to the light?
That's a great question. So I love this story. And, so how do you? So I do want to ask you one thing.
Yes.
So the dark night of the soul is different things for different people. Right?
Absolutely.
For you,
Absolutely.
Ryan, it could be a divorce, it could be losing a job, a loved one, an illness.
A diagnosis, yes.
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 So what did you do next?
We have many, some people have many dark nights or several dark nights. Yes, it could be anything. Your company closes down on you, you lose your home, there are many, many things. So the first step, and I've outlined all these steps in a PDF, which I've made available for everyone. But the first step, you really need to, before you do anything else, you need to make peace with where you're at. And, you know, surrender, it has a very bad rap, but surrender has authentic power. Resistance is a force. And you just want to completely surrender when you can. You want to give up the fight because you cannot access your infinite potential through resistance or fighting. Surrender is a key step in your transformation. And then you want to find out more. So, you know, after you make peace, by the way, that doesn't mean that you give your approval to anything that was done to you or that's happened to you. It doesn't, you know, you may have been betrayed or wronged or abandoned or dealt a crappy hand, whatever the circumstances are. This is just an acceptance and allowing of, this is where I'm at right now. This is the chapter I'm in. It's not my whole book. And then you want to go move into the silence. You want to get presence. You want to listen for that still small voice. So I've unpacked my story here, and it's the same lessons and the same steps, no matter what your dark night is, and they're all laid out for you. You want to find someone who's been through a dark night of the soul and has opened up their infinite potential, that can guide you to help you open up your infinite potential. I had mentors, and I found mentors that could help me because I wanted to get to the other side of it. And there's such richness in all the work I've done. Nothing has let me tap into my infinite potential like the dark nights of my soul. It just completely opens us up to new levels of being.
And one of the things that I noticed you said, because there was a moment where you said you didn't want anybody else to be hurt, but if the plane went down, it would be okay with you. So what was that like when you broke through that? What is it like? Because that is a death wish, and that nothing could be darker than that.
That's
so
right.
Everybody has that, yet you don't talk very much about it. You talk more about that didn't happen, and then you began to move through life, and you began to surrender and understand and be at peace. And that peace sounded to me that it was more being an observer and being objective about what's going on rather than subjective and emotionally reactive. Did I get that right?
Exactly right. It's really, and that's where I speak about the presence. When we're in the present moment, we're in that observer role. And I know this is a concept that's not familiar to everyone, but when you're in the present moment, there isn't the past of what's happened. There isn't the future that looks bleak. There's only right now. And that's when you have the opportunity to connect with your higher power, to hear that still small voice, and to really reflect. And from continuing to go to the present moment, I was able to shift from Ryan's dead, which was, you know, very unpleasant as well, in addition to the experience of being on that plane, to now what? It's a pivot. It's a conscious pivot. So, and yes, and being in the awareness role. And for me, one of the things that opened up for me, and it doesn't open up for everyone, but you can have your own blissful experience, was that the really experiential realization that there is no death, that life is eternal. I had heard that, but when you get in the present moment and you're broken open like that, then you get to really experience that.
Susan, could we say, because it occurs to me this way, that awakening is congruent with synchronicity, with intuition, and it feels to me as though those lessons and those signals that stop us in our tracks are really co-created, that this is something that's going on. We don't really do anything alone. So is awakening the ability perhaps to recognize and hear the voice of the universe on your behalf without the ego?
Yes, I really do believe it. But I don't want anyone to think for a moment that you have to be a guru on a mountaintop to hear the voice. Because let me tell you, I have been in places. I started my transformational work 30 years ago. Before that, even, that voice it's there for everybody. It's you know, your intuition. We're born with it. It will try to speak to us, and you can just recognize it. It's like the voice of someone you know, but it whispers. It will never lay out all the steps that you have to take. It will just simply say, go ask Michael for a ride. It won't tell you why. It'll say, don't park here. It'll say, take a different way home. But it won't ever tell you why. So just learn to trust it. Learn to trust it. And everybody hears it. I'm telling you, if you think you don't hear it, you do. You do. You're just not recognizing it yet. But it will guide you and lead you to your highest self.
So I'm so honored that you're here, and I'm excited for the listeners because your download is the 5. Tell us the name of it again when they click. You want to download this. If this conversation and sharing is engaging you and resonating with you, I want you to download Susan's free gift. And so tell us what that is again, the steps to
So it's a PDF that's your guide from your dark night of the soul to your infinite potential. And I outline the lessons that you'll get and the steps to take. And if you're going through a dark night of the soul right now, please feel a big hug from me. My heart, I extend my heart and my love to you. And if you've already gone through a dark night of the soul, well, you get a hug and my heartfelt love too. And look at the steps and go back, because there's gold to be mined in the dark night of the soul. And so if you're going through it, look for the gold. And if you've already been through one, then go back and look and see if there's something that you left behind there that could really benefit you now. So either way, I suggest you download it, look at the lessons. Did you get all those lessons? And look at the steps you take so you can benefit from them. And then the gold, because the gold is worth more than gold. It's more precious than gold. There are gifts for you waiting in there. And one of them is your infinite potential.
May they, and I'm sticking my neck out here a little bit, but yes, they're going to download what you have. Is it possible that they could share it with you if they'd like to have a conversation with you? Some may be ready, but some may want to talk to you right now. Is that possible?
I would love that. So when you download it, my email address is an invitation for you to contact me. Good. And my email address is on there. So write me whatever you like, and I'd be happy to have a conversation or get back to you by email, whatever you prefer.
Well, that is extremely generous of you. Susan, this has just been phenomenal. I'm going to be downloading your I may have some ahead of me, but I've had a few behind me. And this is Leslie Flowers, and you've been watching Awakening Your Infinite Potential Telesummit with Susan Walsh, and I will see you all at the next speaker venue. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Leslie.